Hi, I'm Wendy McSudis. I'm the First Selectman Town of Simsbury, and this is After Hours with Wendy and Friends. So tonight we are talking with our Public Works Director, Tom Roy, an engineer. Hi, Tom.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Sure. Before we get into the interview, I just wanted to point out that we're going to be going to the Flower Bridge after this interview. This will air after it, but there's a grand opening ribbon cutting tonight, and Bob Bronlich from SCM is going to be there filming. So we hope that people will watch that on SCM because it will be airing later on. And I do want to point out that I did wear my flower earrings in honor of the Flower Bridge reopening. So I'm going to talk to Tom a little bit. I want to say, Tom, I hear that you are kind of a big deal these days. So do you want to give us a little background on what I'm talking about?
Sure. I've been involved in the American Public Works Association actually since I started in Simsbury in 2008. Last year, I was the president in the New England chapter, and through my involvement in that organization this year, I was nominated for and received American Public Works Association Top 10 Public Works Leaders. So that means in all of North America, they select 10 public works leaders based upon what they do in their professional career, involvement in the organization, education, outreach, and this year I was fortunate to be selected.
Okay, so you're a top 10 public works director in North America.
That'd be correct.
Okay, that's pretty good. And I will say that we were invited to the luncheon in Quincy, Mass.
Yes.
Right, and you said there's something next coming?
Yes, later this summer in August as part of the National Association's annual conference, which this year is going to be in Chicago, Illinois, there will be a presentation of that award again in front of a somewhat even larger audience.
Fun.
And one of the things I said when I did get to receive the award in Quincy is going through this whole process really gave me a chance to reflect back on my career and the time I spent in Simsbury. And I really do feel fortunate for the people I work with and for the team that I'm working with. It's really, it really meant a lot to me in terms of spending that time to really reflect back on all the years here and what it meant.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you some questions about all your years here.
Oh boy.
So my first question that I would love to know is, how did you find yourself in Simsbury? And I believe Mary Glassman was the first selectman at that time.
That is correct. I had been working for the MDC in Hartford doing water and sewer projects. And oddly enough, one of my friends asked me if I was applying to Simsbury. Apparently everybody had seen the posting. I had not seen that, and it was somewhat interesting, and it was an interesting opportunity to, believe it or not, get more involved in the operation side of things, the actual field work, and less of just the straight technical engineering and project management that I'd been doing. Came over, had an interview with Mary Glassman and a few others, and I was really fortunate to be selected.
What year was that?
2008.
And was this for a Public Works Director position?
I came in as Public Works Director.
Okay, and you have a background, a degree in what?
I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from UConn,
Okay.
and then I have a master's in construction management from Central Connecticut State.
Okay, that's very cool. You're also a professor at Central?
I am an adjunct professor at CCSU. I've been doing it for 6.5 years.
How, is that fun?
It was interesting, and I tell people I stopped coaching soccer when my kids aged out,
Okay.
and my assistant coach is a professor over at CCSU, and he said I should come over, meet some people. They had a professor going out on sabbatical, and the dean asked me if I'd be willing to fill in and teach a class in hydrology and hydraulics. I said, that's not what I do every day. I work with it, but it's not what I do every day. He said, no, it'd be great. Just give it a try. And that first year was brutal, just getting up to speed on everything. And I found it really enjoyable. I really liked the fact that you interact with the students. It brought me back to kind of my roots of doing technical engineering. I teach only seniors, so you really get to help them with navigating the job market.
Seniors, undergrads? You
Senior
teach?
undergrads, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and are they trying to be civil engineers?
Yes.
Okay.
They are all on their way to becoming civil engineers, and it's amazing. I teach in the fall.
Okay.
And just about every one of them has a job by the time they get through the fall semester.
So there's a big need out there for civil engineers?
There is a huge need for civil engineers right now.
Are you seeing a lot of women in that field?
It's been increasing every year.
Okay.
The most I've had in my class ranges from 15 to 20 people.
Okay.
2 years ago was the largest class in terms of population of women, where we had 5 female students, and it was great.
Okay, I am going to give a plug here. I have a picture in my office of my dad, who was a civil engineer. He's a Michigan grad, and he worked for the state DOT, which at the time I never realized he was a public servant because I just never thought about it, but he worked for the state for his whole career. So I just wanted to give that out to my father. couple other things I wanted to ask you about. So you manage a bunch of departments in town. Some are very visible to the public and some aren't that visible, right?
Right.
So I was going to kind of go through each of your departments. You could mention who your department head is because we know all of them. And just like kind of a little bit about what they do. Okay. And let's start with Highway.
Highway is probably the most visible. They're the really big orange and green trucks. And let me be clear to everybody, I did not pick the colors. I've just kept the colors going.
Okay. No blue and gold?
You would think. I don't want to now suddenly change and have different color trucks. But yeah, Kevin Clemens is our highway superintendent. He does a great job for us. Most notably, the two things are we pave the roads and we plow the roads. We also take care of all of the roadside trees. Anything within about 12 feet of the edge of the roadway on town roads are the highway department's responsibility. One thing that's interesting about Simsbury and all towns in Connecticut is we have about 191 miles of roadway in Simsbury.
Okay.
The highway department, the public works department, is only responsible for 165 miles.
And why is that?
We are not responsible for the maintenance of the state roadways. So as we go through a snowstorm, for example, we actually have our guys, they have to lift up their plow when they get to Route 10, for example. And the reason we do that is not that we don't want to help the state, but as winter operations go on, they may have just put down salt and we don't want to plow off their salt.
Okay.
But what always happens, being that we have a couple of small hills here in Simsbury, 185 is probably the best example.
Yeah.
If that gets jammed up, if cars are sliding, if the police call us and tell us that there's trouble navigating that roadway, our guys are going to go and help.
Okay.
We work closely with the DOT. We're always going to do what's right to help out. The other thing that the highway department does that I think it is hard for some people to recognize, we do a lot with guide rail along the sides of the roadway.
Okay, yep.
It's just one of those small things that it really helps with protecting the motorists in town.
Okay.
You hate to think of somebody having an accident and sliding off the road, but I'd much rather them hit guide rail, bounce back into the roadway rather than hit a tree or end up in a ditch.
Yeah, that's good.
Same thing with roadway markings, all of the stop bars. Every summer we have to repaint those. We repaint the yellow lines, speed limit signs, all of the roadway signs.
Okay, all right. And one thing I will want to ask you, you do offer ride-alongs?
We have snowplow ride-along.
Okay, keep that in mind when winter comes. Hopefully it's a long ways off. How about engineering?
So engineering is a very small department. We have 2.5 employees in engineering.
Okay.
We have Adam Kessler, who's our deputy town engineer, does an amazing job. He manages all of our larger capital improvement projects and the grants that are associated with them. Just for example, the Flower Bridge, the pickleball courts, the Terrifield Trail, all of these are projects that are run through our engineering department.
Okay, we'll ask about some of the projects a little later. How about your maintenance team?
So we have our buildings and grounds team, which does all of our major facilities in the center of town. So town hall, police station, the library. They make sure the buildings are clean and safe. They make sure the lawns are mowed. They make sure the air conditioning is on, the heat is on, all of those little things to make everything just run smoothly. Like all of my team, when they do their job well, nobody notices. But if it's too hot, If it's too cold, you're going to say something. So.
Well, they did a great job. They set up for the Hometown Heroes. What did we recently do before that? We set up for something outside.
There was the flag raising ceremony.
Oh, the flag raising, yeah. So they're always there, kind of behind the scenes. If you're working after hours, you always see everybody in town hall.
The doors open, the doors closed, the doors are locked. Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a great group. And then I don't want to forget people. I know the WPCA.
The WPCA by far is our most behind the scenes operation. Most people know them as just being near the boathouse. I'd like to say the WPCA has one job and one job only, which is to protect the Farmington River. All of our waste that we generate in our homes in Simsbury either goes to the treatment plant or it goes to your own septic system. Even if you have a septic system, there's a good chance that our treatment plant is helping you out, because when you have your septic system pumped, they're bringing that material most likely to our treatment plant. And because we're here and we charge reasonable rates, that actually makes something like your maintenance of your septic system more affordable for a Simsbury resident.
Okay.
For everybody else, they take the waste, and it's everything that goes down a drain in your house, and through a series of biological processes, they clean it up, and the water that goes into the river from the treatment plant is cleaner than the water in the Farmington River.
Okay. And how many people work there? Just
Just
because
10.
Just 10, because it's a big plant.
It's a big plant, and it's essentially one giant machine that's just in there cleaning the water.
And who runs that?
Tony Piazza is our plant superintendent.
Okay, I will give them a plug because they were the winners of this year's Christmas tree decoration contest. And they had a Christmas tree that showed many of the items that came through in their treatment system. So there was...
They have a good sense of humor down there. They have to.
They did. And they had an AI poem on what they do there. So it was really pretty comical. And they did deserve to win that. And we'll see if they win again next year.
And they do offer tours. They offer tours. If residents were interested in a tour, I'm sure Tony would be able to accommodate. And they also bring in some of the elementary schools every year.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
Very neat.
Yeah.
That's cool. Did I miss any departments?
I think you got them all.
Okay.
We also run the landfill on Wolcott Road. We do that with our administrative staff. In addition to the admin that supports me, we also have a project administrator, Chris Patron, who manages some of our smaller projects and our sidewalk program and some of these other things that just could fall through the cracks or don't land specifically in highway or facilities.
Okay. So we talked about talking about some of your favorite projects or projects around town. So I wanted to circle back. And since we're going to the Flower Bridge after this, why don't we start with the Flower Bridge? Give us some insight into what was involved in the renovations that happened.
Sure. The Flower Bridge, really interesting project in that it's an 1800 era bridge that really is the heart and soul of Simsbury in the center. I mean, how many people come to the bridge every day, every summer? You hear people traveling. How many people have had wedding photos, prom photos, rumors of duck races? Maybe I've heard of some kids jumping off of it in the summertime. It all happens, and it's part of Simsbury. So it was really great to be able to help renovate that. And the folks that run the bridge, the old Drake Hill Flower Bridge Committee, amazing set of volunteers, so dedicated to the project, and they actually were involved with us and our engineering team to make sure, they were right in there looking at the plans. So it was very collaborative. One thing that was really nice, they picked the color. I did not want to pick the color. I'm not an architect.
Is it a historical color?
It is the correct historical color. It is federal green.
Okay.
I was actually worried. I thought there would be some feedback to the fact that it was a different shade of green than the faded bluish green the bridge had become by the time we repainted it.
Yep.
And the paint's a very sophisticated paint. It's actually called a coating system.
Okay.
And it's meant to help the bridge withstand the harsh New England winters. Hopefully it's going to last many, many years, and we won't have to do this for a very long time, hopefully not within my career. While we were going through the project, we had a very good engineer that was working with us. We had a good contractor. Silva Engineering was right there making sure that as we cut out the structural members to replace them, that we did it in the appropriate fashion to make sure the bridge was still structurally sound.
Yep.
We evaluated the structural load rating on the bridge to make sure it was as strong as it needed to be. Very technical. There's no math today in anything we're discussing.
Okay, good.
That's why we hire the professionals. But it's really great to see that open and the impact that it has on the community.
Yeah, it's one of the favorite places. It's a tourism spot for everybody. Another big project that we both love and want to see progress is the whole trails. And so you were able to get us connected to the project for the East Coast Greenway project with Bloomfield through Krog. So if you want to talk about that, and then hopefully where we're going to go with that next, which will take a while. Sure.
We were very fortunate in that we received a grant a couple years ago from Capital Region Council of Governments, and it was a federal/state grant, which was for transportation improvements, which allowed us to connect into Bloomfield.
Yeah.
It was great that we partnered with Bloomfield and we were able to share the project. We administered it. And we worked closely with them. But the biggest thing is it took away a real safety risk, especially bike commuters going through that area. It was a limited access highway. It was not an appropriate place for cyclists. I know a cyclist was killed on the other side of the town line in Bloomfield a couple of years ago. And it's really great that we can make a connection that is really getting a lot of use. I'm surprised how many people are using it. And it's really exciting in that it's the next phase of getting us connected from the traditional East Coast Greenway through the center of town, over to Terriffill, into Bloomfield, and eventually that's going to make its way in through Hartford. We are doing some planning studies. We have an alignment which would take us from the end of the current trail through the backside of Terriffill Park, cross the river, and we would end up connecting to the existing trail kind of in the area of Big Y.
Yeah, that's a long-range project.
That is a long-range project.
Because it's a big money.
It's a long-range project. It's big money. We do have some grant funding to get that off the ground with Connecticut DOT and Krog again. We are working with them, and the big challenge is going to be rebuilding the bridge. We are looking to build it in the same location as the old railroad bridge. But again, that's something that's 7 to 10 years out.
But that would be like an iconic path, I think,
It
in
would be
this farm.
Exactly. It would be a destination trail. It would really be something special.
Yeah, so we're hoping that past our time, if we're not here, that this continues to happen.
And one of the key things is Simsbury was one of the first towns to build rail trails. And the first trails we built were easy. It was right along the old rail alignments. They were straight, flat, and level. And now these last pieces are always going to be the toughest pieces. That's why they were left to the end.
So another new project, I'm trying to hit the highlights here, is our pickleball courts just opened in Terrifield Park.
Yes.
And I do want to mention that, this started about 3 years ago, and we ran into issues with FEMA because I now know what a floodway is. And we realized at this point, we really couldn't wait anymore. And so we came up with an alternative with Tom Taberski, Parks and Rec. But I'm going to ask you to talk about it from like the engineering perspective.
Sure. It was a challenging project in terms of it looked very simple on the outside. We were going to take the old tennis courts, we were going to put in pickleball courts. Yeah. Really doesn't sound that complicated. The challenge is that we have to, as the town, be very respectful to the regulations and treat ourselves just as we would any other developer. And with the river, you have the floodplain, which is all of the area that are expected to flood during a 100 or 500-year flood. And you have the floodway, which is a narrower section of the floodplain, which is where the water is actually being conveyed. So you can think of it as actually moving, not just slowly sitting there and being stored.
Okay.
And unfortunately, right now, the location of the tennis court is in that floodway, the more restrictive. You're not allowed to build in there. And we had some long and hard discussions, but our belief is that if we had built the courts the way we wanted to, as post-tension concrete, it would have been a new facility, as opposed to what we did instead was we ground out all of the existing asphalt from the tennis court and put down new asphalt tennis courts. They're beautiful, they look the way they should. The other challenge was we had to make them a little smaller than our Parks and Rec department originally wanted to stay within the existing fence. And the nice thing, when you look at tax dollars, we use the same fencing. It's really rehab, but the court and the play, it looks amazing. And
we got input from the local pickleball experts in town to make sure the size was good. So that was approved.
Exactly.
And from what I heard Sunday, like it was a full house out on the courts.
I have yet to see, I haven't seen the play out there.
Okay.
I was out there right before it opened, but I'm excited to see it put to use. And I think just like all projects in Simsbury, we try to never do them in a vacuum, and we try to incorporate the residents and the groups that are interested. And it was kind of a collaborative effort where the pickleball folks said, yeah, we would rather have slightly smaller court or areas behind the court than to wait another year.
Yeah, and I hope to talk to Tom Taberski at some point about some of the projects that overlap, because everything pretty much overlaps when there's an engineering component, right? And then there's a Parks and Rec component. But I do have a reservation for the courts tomorrow. I heard it's going to be like 90 degrees, so
it is.
I may not be playing. I may have to cancel that. Another project, I don't know if there's anything special that you want to bring up as any projects that come to mind. The Latimer Lane, what was your involvement in that?
I was involved in Latimer Lane in part due to my relationship with the Public Building Committee and just making sure. I really worked as a facilitator on that one, just trying to make sure when there was problems and I had some expertise, I could lend a hand and hopefully smooth out some of the wrinkles in the project.
And you're also the dams and bridges guy, right?
the dams and bridges guy.
The dams, as we say sometimes.
Yeah, and we have a number of small dams in town, and one of the things is they need to be monitored and inspected on a regular basis. We are working on the removal of a couple of dams because the rehabilitation costs are in the millions.
Right.
And if the impoundment has no value anymore, other than sadly for fishing, it's in the town's long-term best interest to remove that dam, turn the stream back to what it once was, which is just a natural stream channel, and ultimately eliminate a risk, which is the dam failure, and an expense of rehabilitating an existing dam.
Okay. So one other topic I'm going to circle to, which we don't like to talk about, but occasionally there are town emergencies that arise. I was a resident for the 2011 storm, so we might get to that one. I've heard the horror stories of that one, but this past summer we had the microburst that came through in August, and your crew and team were really critical to helping residents and getting things cleaned up there. So how did you first hear about it? We walked around town with State Rep Melissa Osborne and Congresswoman Hayes up around Carver Circle, Berry Lane, up around that, and really saw the devastation that you couldn't know happened in town when my neighborhood was untouched. Right. So if you want to talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure. I mean, it was one of those things, like, it happened so often. It was a regular Friday. I had actually, oddly enough, taken a half day to go home and look at some trees in my yard and having some work done. And my highway superintendent called me and said, you got to get back here. It's bad. And I'm like, I'd heard one rumble of thunder. There was nothing happening at my house. And even as I'm making my way back, I'm not seeing something that would be alarming, especially not to my highway superintendent, who rarely is worried about these things. And then the scanner, the police radio and everything is going off, and we're hearing what's going on. We had a temporary command center in the fire station, and we quickly realized that it was a very localized issue. As I started to map out where we had reports of trees down, I was concerned that we'd actually gotten hit by a tornado, just because it was very linear and you could see how the storm hit. In many ways, they called it a straight line wet microburst. The damage was so similar to any layman that it was a tornado. The only difference was it didn't spin, but it was that same level of force. And absolutely shocking level of damage, but to very localized 7 or 8 neighborhoods. And as I always seem to come out of these things, just so grateful nobody was seriously injured. There were reports, there were trees that fell on cars with people in them, the trees that went through homes. So I feel we were very fortunate. Working with police and fire, we kind of got our arms around it. We worked very closely with Eversource, and we kept our crews on overnight the first night, and then went to work, which is first, secure the scene, make sure everything's safe. We worked to restore any of the areas where trees are across the road that do not have power lines. We do not touch power lines in my business. We let Eversource do what they do well. As soon as they deem it safe, we go in with our heavy equipment, we push everything off to the side of the road. It's important for people to know, in case this does happen again, when a tree falls across the road, whether it's the middle of the night or whether it's during a microburst, our first objective is to open the road up. So we will stick that wood right at the edge of the road. We're going to come back and get it, but we're focused on the priority of getting the roads open. I am always terrified when roads become closed and we have neighborhoods that are inaccessible to police, fire, and ambulance. That's my job, is to make sure those resources can get to every resident. So that's always key for us. Then we worked very closely over the next few days. We actually were very fortunate. We had Connecticut DOT.
Can I add an anecdote here? So we were at, Tom, me and Melissa were at the library after we went up to the neighborhoods just to kind of sit with the people that had no power. And we were sitting there, and my phone rings. It says Governor Lamont. So I was like, oops. So I went in the back, and he said whatever he can do to offer to help Simsbury, he would be happy to do that. So I put him in touch with you, and you can tell us what they did. DOT
showed up the next morning at 6 a.m.
How many crews was it?
It was, I believe, 5 crews. It was about...
For 3 days, something like that?
It was 5 crews for 2 days. It was about 30 people. And I can't say enough, the crews showed up ready to work. They came from all over the state. They weren't necessarily from one local garage. And it was great. They came together. They all sort of knew each other, maybe had met other places. They honestly went right to work with our team. We gave them assignments. They were fantastic in that they came to us and our team and said, okay, we're done with this. I have this piece of equipment. Can I help with that? And again, we made an amazing amount of progress over the next 2 or 3 days. We have quite a bit of resources in our own highway department that we put to work. And pretty proud of the overall effort. I know that it's always frustrating. Some residents always want more. We have to stick to within the town right away, the road in that area immediately adjacent to it. I know, people would come to us in the street, as you saw, asking for help. What do I do with, the trees in my house? And it is tough. The hardest part of my job is always saying no.
Yeah, that's a question I have. So the hardest part of job, saying no.
That's right. Yes is the easy answer.
Okay, that's your favorite part of the job, saying yes?
Saying yes. If somebody calls and it's a problem that we can deal with and I can go out and tell one of our crews to go take care of it, that's an easy day for me.
Okay. I just want to give an anecdote. Your story about going home the day of the microburst and not seeing anything. I was home on that Friday, and I decided to go to the movies that afternoon, which I never do. And I get a call from a reporter saying, I hear there's trees down in Simsbury and stuff like that. And I was like, I don't know. My neighborhood is perfectly fine. So I drove a couple blocks and I got to where Stratton Brook and Bushy Hill, and it was closed.
Yeah.
So I called the reporter back and I said, "Yup, the streets. I guess something happened here." And I was on my way to see Twisters, so it was really kind of comical that all happened. Then movie was okay. So, like to kind of transition a little bit to a little bit more personal questions.
Sure.
Because this is after hours, so
Okay.
I'm allowed to ask a few little things. Nothing hard here. Okay, but and they might be a little remote. But I was just curious, where did you grow up? Brothers, sisters? Yeah, like what's your younger, youthful story, whatever.
I think I've just always worked for Simsbury, but
Oh, really?
no, I grew up in Windsor.
Okay.
And it's kind of my thing. I always thought I was going to leave the state, never did. So I grew up in Windsor. I'm the middle of three boys, so
Okay.
yeah, you have to poor mom, three boys. And then I met my wife after I got out of college, and she lived in Pennsylvania. She was up here visiting a friend that I'd gone to college with. And we were kind of long distance for 3.5 years. She was down in Allentown area, Pennsylvania. Okay. And I was actually looking to go work down there. And the company I was with blocked my transfer. They said, you can't negotiate. So like a week later, a recruiter called me, switched jobs, ended up having her move up here. Funny story, as somebody from Pennsylvania, she said, oh, I got a job in Connecticut, Greenwich. And I said, that's not Connecticut. And she explained to me it was. And I said, you don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told her about traffic into Greenwich. She said, I drive into Allentown every day. I said, okay.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, so then we ended up getting married. We were living in Hamden for a year, and then we moved to Farmington.
How long have you lived in Farmington?
23 years.
Okay, I like that you're from Windsor.
Yes.
Just like I'm from Bloomfield, and I too thought I would leave the state, and I've lived here my whole life.
Yeah.
A couple of years in college, out of state, but then I ended up back here. So another question everybody wants to know, are you a sports fan? Do you follow any teams? Is there any specific sport that you like? Are you a Mets fan, a Yankees fan, a Sox fan?
I'm not a big baseball fan, but by
Okay.
heritage and family concerns, I have to be a Red Sox fan.
Okay.
I similarly would say I follow the Patriots. Me and my daughter sometimes hang our head now. It's a challenge being a Patriots fan the last couple of years. Not a huge sports fan in terms of watching sports. I do a lot of outdoor activities myself.
You're a do I call you a cyclist or?
I do a lot of biking, both road biking and mountain biking.
Oh.
I run. I do a lot of triathlons.
You do?
I do.
Okay. When was the last triathlon you've done?
I do a series every summer in Farmington at Winding Trails. I have a series every Tuesday night. There's a sprint triathlon.
Okay.
And I've been doing that for over 20 years.
Okay.
So.
Do you ever, I was going to say, no, that's very impressive. Do you kayak or paddleboard or anything like that at Winding Trails?
I do kayak. In fact, a friend of mine recently was smart enough to buy an extra sea kayak. He lives a little closer to the shore, so I've been going with him. And we're talking about maybe trying to paddle across the Sound.
Really?
Yeah.
That's scary to me.
We're looking to make sure we have a support boat and all that other stuff. But yeah.
Okay. I we started kayaking in Maine on the very calm waters, which I'm fine with. But the first time I went out, it was really windy and it was my first time. And I was like, get me out of here. I didn't want to be in a rocking, even little kayak in a bay. So sports teams, how about, I know you went to Las Vegas recently, right? Were you impressed with Hoover Dam as an engineer? Very
much so. We took the day. We went from Vegas out to the Grand Canyon, and on the way back, it was getting a little late, and my wife was actually questioning, are we going to stop at the dam? What kind of question is that? I'm a civil engineer. We have to. And it was really nice. We were there kind of at sunset and looking at the bridge from the Pat Tillman Bridge. And you can look down at the dam and, same thing. Oh, do you really want to go down there? It's kind of getting dark. I'm like, well, let's go down. And I didn't think you could drive across the bridge anymore.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I didn't think you'd drive across the dam anymore.
Okay.
And we're going down there, and we had a rented convertible, and you could look up at the bridge, and then you take the corner. And I'm waiting to see where they tell you to stop before you go over the dam. I'm going, wow, we're going to get arrested. This is crazy. We go across the dam. Then I see all these other cars parked on the other side, but definitely impressed by
isn't it like Nevada and
Arizona, and then
in the middle or something?
Yeah, and then you switch time zones as well because they have the clock on each side, and it's an hour different.
I thought it was a really freaky place.
Yeah.
Because it's just like a time warp. I feel like you're in a time warp of the United States when you see that. And I think it's just scary.
Well, it's just interesting. It's just the massive, and it's hard to understand how big this is and the people built it. It's pretty impressive.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So one last personal question, because I think we're getting close to our time. So when you drive around, I know you have your work, ready to answer anything.
Yeah.
But even in your free time or whatever, what do you listen to when you're cruising around Simsbury or out in Farmington or going to winding trails? Like, what's your go-to music?
Well, it's funny. I'm all over the place, and on my little playlist, it's everything from AC/DC to maybe some light pop rock. It's all over the place. Been listening to a lot of 70s music lately, and it's really my son of all things, my son started listening to it. I don't don't know why he got into it.
Cycling back because that was the greatest era for music?
Maybe, but that one came in, and like they have on Spotify, like the CCR channel. I've been listening to that, the AC/DC channel.
Yeah. Yeah, I like all music. I mean, 70s to now, but mostly I like 90s alternative was a favorite. I was like the late 70s punk rock scene. And then high school in the 70s to definitely date myself. That was the classic rock, greatest probably era of music, I think, ever, because people are still listening to it, right? How about any other thing you want to add that people might want to know about you? That I haven't asked you? I don't know. I'm just trying to say, you love your job?
It is. I think I said it when I was doing the big acceptance speech. You went to it for the award ceremony in Quincy, Mass. I really feel it's just, I don't know what else I'd want to do.
Great.
It's just a combination of being able to work with people, work with great teams, technical stuff.
Okay. All right. I think we're good. So I'm going to say thank you, Tom. It was a pleasure to see you here after hours, even though it's really kind of in hours. And we're happy to have been able to have this. And we hope that you're going to watch, or you watch this and you enjoy it, and let SCM know, or let me know if you're finding this entertaining. And we plan to keep going. And we'll see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education,
and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actually preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.